Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining the European movement this evening for the event, What Putin's Invasion of Ukraine Means for Europe. And I am delighted to be chairing this evening's event. Given the seriousness of the topic, I am also very, very pleased with the speakers who are joining us this evening to talk about their understanding and their perspectives on that, on indeed the title of this evening's events. I'm Clare Moody. I was a member of the British member of the European Parliament. I sat on the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee and was also a member of the Euronest, which was the European Parliament's and the Eastern Partner Countries Parliamentary Association, where we parliamentarians sat together as well. And through that, I had the privilege of being in Kyiv a number of times and working with Ukrainian colleagues, as well as with other Eastern partner countries. So this is a topic that is very, very close to my heart as well. But I'm delighted that this evening we're joined by three speakers. The first who will speak tonight is Sophie Katsarava, who is the Georgian ambassador to the UK, and it's an absolute pleasure that you could join us this evening, and on what is a pretty momentous day for Georgia as well. So, Sophie, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you for inviting me to this evening's event. Greetings to the distinguished speakers and to those who are watching us this evening. And Claire, to you especially, because it is indeed a momentous day for Georgia. And for the record, Claire and I have known each other for years, since my times in the Parliament when I was chairing the Foreign Affairs Committee. So greetings again. So before each of us share the thoughts about the future of Europe from our respective perspectives, I would like to reiterate again that we strongly condemn Russia's premeditated and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine, which is a clear and blatant violation of fundamental principles of the international law. We firmly support Ukraine and are in full solidarity with the people of Ukraine, as we, Georgians know well, very sadly, what Ukraine is going through now. There is certainly an emotional engagement in this devastating conflict because we know more than most about the appalling costs of Russian aggression as we experienced it in 2008, and we still face ongoing occupation of two regions of Georgia. So what we see today is an unprecedented unity and consolidation of Europe, the West, and the international community against Russian aggression. We see European leaders' strong support as well as practical support to Ukraine, including humanitarian aid and also finding the ways through diplomatic channels to stop the aggression. So while the immediate, urgent and imminent objective is to stop Russian aggression in Ukraine, we perhaps need to look ahead as well, and Europe and its leaders should feel more confident about Ukraine's, Georgia's, and Moldova's European future. And we have had enough lessons throughout these decades and are right now experiencing the devastating attack on Ukraine. So we are not only talking about conventional threats and aggressions throughout the years. Both Georgia and Ukraine have been subject to ongoing Russian disinformation and other malign and powerful tool to influence the public. And it is not by chance that I mentioned trio, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and realistic European future. Perhaps it couldn't have been the most relevant timing for me to speak at the European Movement platform, as it is a historic day for Georgia. We have officially applied for the EU membership today. Moldova has also joined, and of course, you are very much informed about Ukraine and its recent membership application. Georgia was planning to apply for membership in 2024, but given the context and the new realities, we made the intentions clear today. So there is a clear message that the East is looking west. As all of us find ourselves in new realities, I believe Europe needs to remain united and consolidated around their decisions towards Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, countries with common histories, the European aspirations, and the firm choice of our public to become members of the European Union. So despite our vulnerabilities, having Russian troops within kilometers away in our occupied regions, we made this historic decision. Security challenges will remain in our region, and Europe is likely to take these challenges and is taking these challenges seriously, as the current invasion was a wake-up call for the West, unlike perhaps other examples such as 2008 Russian invasion in Georgia or seizing Ukrainian territories in 2014 and annexing Crimea. But now it is the time for the West to embrace the countries who share fundamental values and show the support to counter existing and potential threats and risks that might further emerge. So I think mine was more than 5 minutes. So I will be happy to take questions during the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sophie. And yes, it is lovely to see you. But indeed, as you said, the one of the significant changes that has happened as a consequence of Putin's invasion of Ukraine has indeed been speeding up of the application of Georgia and Moldova, and as you rightly said, the very clear application from President Zelensky a couple of days ago as well. So our next speaker is Reinhard Bütikofer, who is a former colleague of mine in the European Parliament. Clearly, he is still there. I wish the UK still had members of the European Parliament. But Reinhard has got a lot of expert and detailed knowledge of Ukraine and indeed Eastern Partner country relations, and is a German Green MEP. Reinhard, please.
Thank you, Claire, for organizing this, and thanks for having me as a part of this conversation. I think I should start by quoting a word that the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz last Sunday used 6 times in a speech he gave to the Bundestag. That's the word Zeitenwende. He described the situation in which we are as a historical turning point, as the end of an era or the beginning of a new epoch in Europe's history. And I think this is indeed what we are confronted with. Because the Russian aggression against Ukraine has far wider reaching implications. And I would dare say that the time of collaborative security around Europe, based on shared principles, is now over because Russia has gutted these principles. Since the days of Helsinki or the days of Paris or the NATO-Russia Accord, there had been principles agreed between Russia and the rest of Europe that we hoped to be building a European order on. And we had done so, and it is, of course, true that Russia has started undermining the principles of this order long ago. The ambassador has mentioned the war against Georgia. There have been other offensive efforts to push a revisionist policy like the war in 2014 when Putin took Crimea from Ukraine and had these two so-called People's Republics erected in the eastern part of Ukraine. But for the majority, I would say, of European leaders, the hope still existed that somehow using dialogue, Russia could be convinced to continue cooperating in building a European order that is by and large guided by the principles of sovereignty and mutual respect and the guarantee of national borders and the right of each nation to choose its alliances and all that. But obviously, this is not the case. So while Ukraine and the Ukrainian people deplorably now bear the brunt of Putin's aggressive revisionist policies and will suffer much from that, his intent goes way beyond just getting control of Ukraine. He has said as much. He has clearly expressed his ambition to gain control of the security of at least Eastern and Central Europe, and by implication, become the dominant power in Europe. I would say that the European Parliament already in recent years had been a leader in the EU in building a democratic front against that policy. And this week, the European Parliament adopted a very tough-worded resolution with a supermajority of more than 600 votes in favor and less than 15 votes opposed. But of course, the European Parliament by and of itself will not be able to move the European agenda, so a lot depends on what the member states do. And in that context, I would say that the velocity, the decisiveness with which a very tough sanctions package has been put together has been unprecedented. A lot of observers that have been critical of Europe's foreign policy for a long time expressed their surprise and almost admiration that the European Union did come up with tough measures, including buying arms to support Ukraine. For some member states, this necessitated to overturn some long-standing principles. That is certainly the case for my own country, Germany. But I think this is absolutely needed. And I'm happy that we have proven that the European Union is able to act. And I'm also happy to see that we are not isolated in that course, but that we are supported by a vast majority of the nations in the United Nations General Assembly. Never before has the United Nations General Assembly had such an overwhelming majority. Never before has a major power been so isolated as Russia is in this case, with only the infamous 5 voting against the resolution. I believe that we will have to revisit a lot of our policies, including our energy dependency on Russia. In the past, the argument had been, and this was not my argument, I've always been relatively critical. I've been a a leading opponent of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that is now dead as a doornail. But the overwhelming majority in many countries believed that the energy relationship we had with Russia was creating a mutual dependency, and that this could be seen as a basis for stability and peace. It's not the case. It's the other way around. These dependencies have been weaponized against us, and that means we have to find new policies also in that dimension. We are in a new era, and we will have to do some very hard thinking, but I am positively inclined because I see that in this hour of need and in this hour of danger, Europe pulls together and shows a great deal of solidarity with Ukraine and begins understanding that this is not just about somebody else's security, but our own too.
Thank you, Reinhard. Yes, thank you very much for those insightful comments around the position both of the Parliament, but as you rightly put it, the wider European Union and its seismic response, which has, yes, as you say, been much more dramatic than I think was expected by many observers beforehand. So our final speaker this evening is Kees, who was the ambassador from the Netherlands to Ukraine at the time, indeed, of the last Russian action in Ukraine, with Crimea and the Donbass area. So I'm very happy to introduce you. Kees, please take the floor.
Claire, thank you very much, and for this invitation. I'm most honored. Let me say that first of all, I would like to wholeheartedly share the thoughts just expressed by Mr. Bütikofer, and I also want to share my friendship with Georgia, a country that I know well. And even at the time of the invasion in 2008, I was there with Javier Solana to mount an EU monitor mission over there. Let me indeed start in 2014 when I was in Kiev. We lived through the Maidan, and you know, this popular uprising. The cause was the sudden decision by its president Yanukovych not to sign the association agreement with the EU. And it evolved into also a demonstration of the desire of the people to become a normal country and end the systemic corruption. And also the fact that the president could be manipulated by the Kremlin. That was the third factor. Now, I want to address the narrative from the Kremlin about what happened. President Putin calls this a fascist coup. And he continues to insist on that narrative that immediately sprang up when Yanukovych left the country. Let me tell you that Mr. Yanukovych, the president, already started to pack his bags while the negotiations on a peaceful solution with the European Troika were still ongoing. Secondly, that he has been ousted by the parliament of Ukraine by a very large majority, a constitutional majority, including the members of his own party. There's nothing unconstitutional about that. Secondly, that immediately thereafter, democratic elections were organized to choose a new president, new parliament. So the whole construct that there is a sort of Nazi regime in Kiev is a complete, make-up. But it is that same story which continues today. And it's the same war that was started in 2014 that continues today. Europe and NATO were unprepared at that moment. They had underestimated the threat. And I always believed, and I also spoke to the fact that I expected the president of Russia to go beyond what he had achieved in Crimea and the Donbass. But the scale with which this is now done is indeed, shocking. And again, we were unprepared for such an event. And I think it's entirely right, as Mr. Bütikofer quoted Bundeskanzler Scholz, who spoke of a Zeitenwende. This is indeed a Zeitenwende. But the big question is whether we will together, I mean the West, the EU, the US, Canada, Japan, and others, whether we will be up to the challenge. Because the challenge is very grave and multidimensional. There's war, there's a threat to democracy, there's a revenge on history, and it creates a humanitarian crisis, it creates an energy crisis, and it's drawing new sharp dividing lines in Europe. It is an escalation which is unprecedented. So I think we have to be very firm and push back, so to say, very strongly in order to, get things back under control, because they clearly are not under control. So we should be very careful not to congratulate ourselves too early. That applies to the EU, that also applies to NATO, who likes to boast about its achievements. But the reality is that NATO defenses are not in order at all, because the lack of performance of European members of NATO, including my own country. That's reality. So it is a tremendous challenge, both for the EU and NATO. And indeed, the good news is that we have been very unified up until this point. And let's not forget that this effort at unification of our policies was led by the President of the United States and not by European leaders. And that is also a remarkable fact. So I see the future of Europe as being very much in partnership with the United States. That is our survival mode, so to say. And I think our European rhetoric should be more aware of this. And of course, we should prepare ourselves also to change that may occur in the United States itself. But it remains our most important partner. There are a lot of measures that we need to take externally and internally. We need to, really have a crash program on our defense efforts. We have to prepare also a transnational program against kleptocracy, because it is the strategic corruption by the Russian oligarchs in our capitals, the influencing of, Russian money, which is also affecting our democracies. So we have to act on many fronts. We have to act on the humanitarian front. We have to open up humanitarian corridors in order to provide medical aid to the people who are starving now in Mariupol. So what I want to say, in short, is that the challenge is tremendous, and we have only begun to take measures, and there is still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kees. Thank you very, very much. I think we have temporarily, well, I hope temporarily, lost Reinhard. So I've got a number of questions, and I was going to particularly ask him, but I might redirect them to both of you as well. Before we go to taking questions from people who are watching us live on YouTube and Facebook, I believe. Welcome back, Reinhard. Thank you. So I'm, just wanted to ask you, and Sophie in particular, looking at the EU currently from the outside, how dramatic do the changes that have happened over recent days look, and how long-standing do you think they will be?
Thank you very much, Claire. I briefly spoke about the unity, and I want to reinforce that message. Actually, that this is this is my take on our take on the unity and very strong solidarity, coordination, consolidation of Europe. And pressure on Russia. And that is exactly the point that I tried to get across about remaining united in future, particularly in the context that I've spoken about. And Claire, perhaps you will understand, and I'm sure others too, the reason why we are talking at the moment, and it's not just now, but we have been talking about that when you were in the parliament and we were in the parliament, and it continues to be the same. The rhetoric and not just the rhetoric, but determination about Georgia's, and in this case, obviously, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, European future. This is very important that Europe at the moment remains united because we are all facing security challenges. We are all facing the threats and because we are facing new realities, especially now. That's why it is so important for all of us and for countries like us especially that we see Europe united and consolidated.
Thank you, Sophie. And Reinhard, I think there is a particular sort of standout part of what's been changing over the last few days. It has been the response in Germany and the the dramatic difference that there has been with the change in position of the SPD, but also clearly, the Green Party grew out of a strong pacifist movement in Germany, and so these are significant moves. Given that there has been growing talk inside the EU for a number of years around having a bigger role in defence and a bigger role in defence spending, what's the significance of that German change in that wider European context of how you think that will move things on? Reinhard, could you hear me?
Thank you, Claire. Our Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, has said recently, new realities have to be met with new policies. Now, I would concede that the new reality could have been foreseen, maybe to some degree. There have been warnings in the past about Putin's revisionist ambitions, and we had the facts on the ground. The occupation that I spoke about in eastern Ukraine, the reality in Georgia that the ambassador spoke about, other policies too. But certainly there has been a certain level of, I'm afraid we have to concede, of complacency. There had been hope against hope that maybe the gap could be bridged through dialogue. When we entered government and formed the tripartite coalition, we insisted that Germany should change the trajectory of its Russia and China policy. And it's been, and that is a fact, the minor parties in this coalition, the Greens and the Liberals, that fought very hard for new thinking in the relationship with China. So I think the transformation of Germany's policy had been in the making because of the need to acknowledge changing realities. But of course, the shock of this Russian intervention sped up the whole process considerably. And then I'm very glad to be able to report that the Chancellor took the lead in formulating new policies that have to be implemented now. Of course, my party grew out, as you said, of pacifist movements many decades ago, but it should not be forgotten that when we were in government last time, from 1999 to 2005, we also took very tough decisions on the security front, supporting NATO's action in Kosovo and supporting the right of self-defense according to the UN Charter of the United States after 9/11. So we have also a tradition of security responsibility, and we have been one of the voices that have emphasized the need to pursue an anti-authoritarian policy as a guiding principle in this day and age. And this is obviously not just Russia that we have to be concerned with. And it's probably not a coincidence that just a few days before the Russian intervention, President Putin and President Xi of China met and agreed on a Dragon Bear alliance, stating that there should be no limits to their cooperation. So democracy worldwide is being challenged by a wave of authoritarianism and a wave of new great power policy, where the principles of multilateralism, that the strength of rule of law should be the determining factor of in international relations, is being overturned. I found it very important that the German government did take these steps, investing more in security, obviously, but also overturning a time-honored policy of being very restrictive with regard to arms exports when there is a hot conflict. This had been very popular in Germany across the board, by the conservatives, by the liberals, by the socialists, by everybody. Now there is a new sentiment in Germany, and a vast majority of the population supports showing solidarity with Ukraine, also by sending arms. So indeed, I think this has been almost like a shock to many, because those were very decisive steps that the Chancellor announced, but it had been building up more or less over time, because the need to forge a new policy had been visible for some time now.
Thank you, Reinhard. Absolutely. Although, yes, as you say, the Green Party and Joschka Fischer, when he was in government in the early 2000s, was very strong on this. Yes, it's been a bigger change for the SPD, perhaps, than the Green Party in the recent times. But Kees, can I come back to you in terms of the European Parliament, as Reinhard had said, it's that it passed this very strong resolution this week in response to Putin's invasion. It and with very strong support from across a much more fractured political parliament than you've seen before 2019. So, it demonstrates that the Parliament is leading the way, if you like, amongst the European Union institutions. You mentioned about the importance of sustainability, that you're seeing this unity right now, but that needs to be sustained. Right. How do you think that is going to be sustained, given the response to Russia is not without cost to citizens as well? The Reinhard mentioned about energy and other factors that are going to feed back to the populations. So I'd be really interested in you following up on that point.
Thank you. With pleasure. Indeed, let me first commend the European Parliament on its actions. When being in Ukraine, the European Parliament was a very clear voice. It was like the political conscience of Europe. And I know the European treaties, I know, in a formal sense, the European Parliament doesn't have so much powers. But outside Europe, it's very much heard. And in a political sense, yes, sometimes leading, in ideas. And it's directly elected by the people of Europe. So it is a voice to be reckoned with. Now, the leaders of member states, the heads of state and government, will meet, if my understanding is correct, next week in Versailles. And of course, they will have to further develop the tools of that new Zeitenwende. And I'm very much, let's say, encouraged by the Sondersitzung of the Bundestag last Sunday, the special session, where this new policy was announced with a big majority. So this is a, really a game changer for European security policy. Not only because of the increase in defense spending, but also, it has to have wider consequences and really enable a European defense cooperation, which was not possible because of the diverging, let's say, defense philosophies of Germany and France and the UK. I mean, they were all three incompatible. So let's hope that there can be now more compatibility, but it's not just Germany which has to change. But we have some, let's say, remnants of thinking that you can do things on your own, like Gaullism and Global Britain, which are ideas which go, in the opposite direction. We need unity now. We need to have policies that reinforce each other rather than being jealous, of the others. And so there's let's say, the political, psychological element, which is very important. And I think, yes, France and the UK also have to step forward. And this is not about institutions. This is about security, doing real things in security together. And there's no contradiction between the EU and NATO because we have one single set of forces for both. And they need to be, they need to be strengthened at high speed. And that will be the challenge, to do that very fast and much faster than was thought possible earlier, so that it will have industrial consequences as well. But I think it can be done, but it will need to be pushed further. The same with of course, the green transition and the energy transition that we must have. You mentioned costs. That will require, tough decisions on all sides. My own country, the Netherlands, is also very much dependent on gas. And gas is, becoming almost very, you can't pay for it anymore. So we need to change. But also, I think we have to strengthen our policies, in the field of money laundering. And I think all European capitals have, a role to play, have room for improvement, so to say. I think London, I think Amsterdam, Luxembourg, Cyprus, they all have steps that they must take. Concerning Ukraine, I think our policy is not strong enough. We must press on with military support and with also strengthening the sanctions. And not all the relevant banks are part of the exclusion in SWIFT. So we need to exclude more banks, and we need to make sure that we diminish our energy dependency much faster. So yes, there's a lot that needs to be done, and leaders have the responsibility to keep the momentum, because we know that such a momentum can easily be lost. Also because it will be a very long process. We will not achieve our objectives that Russia leaves, Ukraine with its troops very quickly. And our Georgian colleague Sophie knows all about it. That territory that the Russians have occupied, they keep it, and they don't tend to give it back. So in order to reverse the situation, we will need long years of pressure and making clear that this policy has a price. Yes, we'll have new dividing lines in Europe, yes, but we have to have the stamina, and that will be a challenge for our democracies. But that's not, let's say, shy away from it. Let's build this policy together. Let's build this Europe together, also with the UK. I think this is also an opportunity to bring the UK, let's say, closer together again, because there's really something at stake. This is not about fisheries. This is about security, and so it can be done, and that maybe can also help to carry the message to the people that together we are stronger.
Thank you, Kees. Thank you. And Reinhard, please. Yes.
I just want to follow up on some of the remarks that Kees made, because I find they are very, very central. First and foremost, all of us have been too lenient vis-a-vis Russian corruption and money laundering around Europe. And I think this has to be the hour where we get tough. And we need legislation. I would hope that the European Commission would propose such measures, either to be implemented by the member states or to be implemented at a European level, if possible. But that also has to be coordinated with the UK and with Switzerland. And fortunately, Switzerland, after much hesitation, came around and joined our sanctions. So there might be a golden opportunity now. Also, I believe that when we talk about security, we have to argue on the basis of a wider concept. Security is not just about the 100 billion that Germany will invest additionally for hardware. Security is also about reducing dependencies, reducing resource dependencies, reducing fossil dependencies. To make the point, I maybe overemphasize it, but the green transition that we have tried to develop in the European Union is not just an issue of climate policy. It's not just an issue of future economic competitiveness. It has also become an issue of national security.
Absolutely.
If you wean your economies from fossils, that creates a level of national security. And that isn't a lesson that we all have to understand. By the way, we just saw the last report by the UNFCCC about where we stand with our battle against climate change, and the decisiveness that we are trying to show against Putin's aggression also has to be implemented with this additional challenge that we are all confronted with. And there is no time to spare, and we cannot put that on the back burner.
Thank you. And we've had a lot of questions come in as well from people who are watching this being broadcast. Just to pick one, the question is, if the sanctions have no effect, what steps can realistically be taken next to prevent Ukraine being overcome with consequences including high civilian mortality, possible execution. So the question is now up on the screen as well. Sophie, do you want to come in on this, or And actually, while you're coming in, there's another question that's also been raised on something that Reinhard touched on about the sort of Russia becoming a pariah state in the West, but what about that China-Russia relationship, and does that give Russia sort of oxygen, if you like? So if you can pick up something of either of those questions, that would be great. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Claire. Well, if sanctions won't work, I think it's something that perhaps our colleagues will elaborate more from the European Union countries. Our perspective, this is something that we keep raising. A lot depends on the resilience of the international community. A lot depends on the pressure on Russia. And it is not, we are now talking about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. But more broadly, again, going back to the issue of Georgia, again, going back to 2008 invasion, 2014, all those, all that happened and were lessons in a way. We were looking at the international community and we were raising alarm bells that this is serious, this is important, and this needs to be addressed. And now we are facing this imminent challenge and the risk. And here too, we depend on how resilient the international community will be and whether these sanctions would work or not. The pressure is something that this needs to stop. And I might, again, rely on the answer of our colleagues who will give more specific answers to that. But I do not have yes and no answer to that, to be honest. It's a security challenge for all of us. And I think there is a greater and more realization and acknowledgement that it's a security challenge for the entire Europe. And I think the West is more vigilant and more aware and alarmed of what's going on, and the more pressure on Russia to stop the conflict and security challenges that we are facing, the sooner the better. This is in our interest. This is in the interest of the entire region, and especially countries like Georgia, who are located in a vulnerable region, and the sensitivities of which you are all aware.
One thing you did mention earlier, Sophie, which actually hasn't been picked up on enough, is the disinformation and Russia's role in spreading disinformation as well. So I think there are lessons we could all learn, and I know Georgia has had to learn some of those lessons in a very hard way. So is there any more you want to say on that as well?
Exactly, disinformation has been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge in Georgia and Ukraine. And as I said, so we talk about conventional threats these days because, again, it is happening and it is devastating what we see. But it's yet another powerful tool that we have to counter. But again, the international community, especially the UK and other countries, were quite active both Georgia and Ukraine in countering disinformation. But again, we face now the reality that there needs to be more to be done to counter disinformation, because it is equally threatening as we talk about non-conventional threats. So at the moment, what we face in Georgia, talking about Georgia's example, is the occupation of our 20% of our territories, which is ongoing. We have been dealing with that for decades, and if we had more time, obviously, I would have elaborated more about what it implies in addition to security challenges, but also the human rights violations in the occupied regions, etc., etc. That's a big challenge. At the same time, disinformation, we should be undermining that as well, and that needs to be given due attention, which has been, but in future, I think we should be thinking more about how to consolidate around that as well.
Thank you. Kees.
Yes, on this particular point, with pleasure. Disinformation is an extremely powerful tool. We had the experience in the Netherlands with the referendum on the association agreement for Ukraine, which was voted down based on, a large part disinformation of the public. And and in the UK, you also have experience with manipulation of the voters, at the eve of the Brexit referendum. And my compliments to courageous journalists at the Guardian newspaper who brought all this to light. I want to mention that explicitly because they are at the forefront of the fight against disinformation. So yes, we need the UK, we need the Guardian, we need the spirits of democracy and free press very much. Having said that, I personally support the measures taken against RT. There were some, that's the Russian propaganda journal. There were some concerns expressed by associations of journalists that this could be, the start of censorship of the free press. My point is RT is not a free press, it's a state agency. So let's not confuse the free press and the state agencies. And they should not have the equal chances, because particularly those who are, pernicious in the way they spread stories. We need to take them on. We should not be shy about that, even if that has repercussions in Russia as well. Of course, there is an issue of media literacy. There is the issue also of quality of our media, which have been under pressure because of the fact that they lost a lot of revenue because of the advent of social media. A lot of advertisement income has been going to the social media, and so independent newspapers have had a hard time in the United States, everywhere in Europe, and we need to support these quality media. I also make personal contribution to quality newspapers just because I like what they are doing. Without even having a subscription, I send sometimes some money. I think this quality has to be paid for, because there are people working there who are doing an excellent job in informing us, in analyzing situations. So as much we can do also as civil society to support them and be less passive. So that's what I wanted to say about this.
That's actually, yes, I saw some very interesting research about the strength of local papers and the correlation to people's citizens' engagement. So not just the national papers, but also that regional and local
Right.
coverage that gives political accountability and connection to citizens with their politicians. Reinhard, I think you look like you want to come in on this as well.
Yes, indeed. Disinformation is, of course, one of the main fronts in this ongoing battle. And the European Parliament, indeed, just today decided that the special committee looking into disinformation would be given a new mandate. So there will be more work done on that inside the European Parliament, because it's so important. But we should not be shy of mentioning that we can also fight disinformation effectively. And I would quote the novel usage that the United States made of their intelligence in informing the public back home and also around Europe about the intentions from the Russian side. I think that was a very effective way of sort of laying bare the intentions and the preparations, and helping to prevent people from being completely overwhelmed by what Putin was was driving at. I wanted, however, also to go back to the question about sanctions possibly not having an effect. The question is, as I see that, what the person means when he asks this question. I would not count on our economic sanctions alone being strong enough, possibly, to end the war that Putin is waging. This is why we also have to supply arms. I think the reasoning in Moscow might change if the Ukrainian defenders of their nation succeed in holding off Russian offenses another, say, 2 weeks possibly. If they can hold their positions, Putin initially had the ambition of celebrating a blitzkrieg victory already last Saturday. That went wrong. So if the effort to overwhelm the Ukrainian National Army and Ukrainian citizens defending their country, if that goes wrong, then I think the economic impact that our sanctions are effectively having, and you see it when you look at the value of the Russian currency already, then that might gain more leverage because, as has been said before, if the price for such an aggressive policy becomes much, much higher than a possible benefit, then that might make people rethink. Now, obviously, Putin doesn't think in economic categories. I think he thinks in categories of empire building. So because that is why he might be not as prone to listen to advice that points at the economic destruction that Russia is going to experience. But others might think differently. So the combination of tough economic sanctions and arms support that could possibly change the trajectory, but not the economic sanctions just by themselves.
Thank you, Reinhard, and thank you for that very, sort of practical, I suppose, perspective on the combination of policies that are being brought to bear in all of this. I am really sorry to say that we are coming to the end of our time, and there have been a number of questions that I would have loved to have put to the three of you as well, but your contribution to the debate this evening has been really informative and really good for us. I would welcome you just doing a final concluding couple of comments on where you think we are now going to go in the very near future. So I will do this in reverse order, if that's all right. First of all, Kees, just any concluding remarks you'd like to give to the audience?
We need to defend democracy in Europe. That's what we need to do. Also in Ukraine. We have to prepare ourselves for the long battle. And we will have to muster the fortitude and the courage to do that. That's my message.
Thank you. Thank you. Powerful and concise. Thank you. Reinhard.
I would echo that. This is not a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. And we have to learn how to run this marathon successfully. But guided by our values, I think we can, in the end, be successful.
Thank you. Sophie.
Claire, I think my comment agreeing to what's been said, I would add that I think all of us need to emerge more resilient out of this and stronger. I think that it's really important that we are more resilient
Thank you. Well, on behalf of the people that have been watching this, I am very grateful to all of you for joining us this evening. As I think we have touched, we didn't go into Brexit in any detail, but there are a lot of people in the UK who are very interested and very keen that we continue to be part of the European conversation. And having speakers like you join us for events like this evening is very much a part of doing that. So thank you all, and I hope you will join us again very soon. But thank you for these contributions.
Thank you. You're welcome.